Welcome to Logical News. Today we're going to be talking about Bill Gates. Bill Gates is in the headlines again, and it's always positive. They always put a good spin on it, and for some reason this guy can't do anything wrong. Gates Foundation commits 2.5 billion to ignored women's health. The investment is among its first big commitments since Gates announced this year that he would give away his 200 billion fortune by 2045. By the way, the ignored women's health, that just implies that what women are ignoring their own health? Who's ignoring their health? Why do women need other people to care about their health? Can they not care about their own health? These are just the questions that I ask. The Gates Foundation will spend 2.5 billion by 2030 on women's health, it said on Monday, with founder Bill Gates saying the area including conditions from preeclampsia to menopause had been neglected for too long. The investment is among its first big commitments since Gates announced earlier this year that he would give away his $200 billion fortune by 2045. It is around one-third more than the foundation spent on women's and maternal health research and development over the last 5 years. Women's health continues to be ignored, underfunded, and sidelined. Too many women still die from preventable causes or live in poor health, Gates said in a statement. That must change. I mean, people will always die from things like that are preventable. It's just like part of life. I don't know. I don't know what that. These are just vagaries that are designed to make you feel good. The work will look at deeply under-researched areas that affect hundreds of millions of women in both high and low-income countries, from preeclampsia and gestational diabetes to heavy menstrual bleeding, endometriosis, and menopause. Investment will focus on 5 key areas: obstetric care and maternal immunization, maternal health and nutrition, gynecological and menstrual health, contraceptive innovation, and sexually transmitted infection. The aim is to kickstart research, develop products, and ensure equitable access to them worldwide. The Foundation's head of gender equality, Dr. Anita Zaida, what a job. Oh, where do you work? Oh, I work for the Bill Gates Foundation. What do you do? Head of gender equality. Like, is that within the company? Gender equality in the world? What is she doing? Said that the field had been held back in part because of bias and a lack of data on key issues, such as how drugs cross the uterus. So I guess first steps is they're going to have to try to test a bunch of drugs on women to see if they cross the uterus. If you look at the literature, there may be only 10 women who've been studied ever, she told Reuters. We don't even have the answers to these basic questions. There's so much missing in this quote. If you look at the literature, what literature? There may only be 10 women who've ever been studied. For what? What specifically were these 10 women the only ones to be studied for? We don't even have the answers to these basic questions. What questions? You haven't even stated any questions. Like, this is reporting today. Like, you just give basic vagaries, and it hints at what you want people to feel, and then they feel it and they move on. Just 1% of the healthcare research and innovation spend went to female-specific conditions beyond cancer, a 2021 analysis by McKinsey & Co. found. That analysis isn't linked here. I don't know what health innovation spend means. Who's doing the innovating? Who's spending the money? Whose money is it? Who's doing the research? Like, nothing is answered here. I don't understand. Zaida acknowledged that the 2.5 billion was a drop in the bucket compared with what was needed and called on others to step in, including the private sector, philanthropists, and governments. NBC. So, I mean, my first thought is just women get away. Like, anything that Bill Gates is funding, get away. He's going to experiment on you. I don't trust this man. Let's just look at a few things. There's so much we can do. And then I'm going to end this video with a super clip of just Bill Gates being weird and creepy. So from The Diplomat, why are Indians so angry at Bill Gates? The latest backlash against the Gates Foundation in India is the result of years' worth of concerns raised by human rights activists and civil society. This is from 2021. Last month, Bill Gates' divorce and allegations of sexual misconduct made headlines in Western media. But in India, the billionaire philanthropist and his foundation have been under criticism for months for completely different reasons. Indians have called for Gates' arrest over alleged violations of medical ethics and laws by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in the country, Arrest Bill Gates trended on Indian Twitter in May, part of the campaign calling Indian authorities to charge the BMGF and Gates for conducting illegal medical trials on vulnerable groups in 2 Indian states. It's being claimed that the BMGF conducted an unlawful clinical trial of a vaccine on tribal children without the consent of their parents. As per a Great Gamelindia report, a Seattle based NGO, you always got to look out for the NGOs, Program for Appropriate Technology and Health, PATH, was funding the BMGF conducted trials in Telangana's Khammam, where they administered the HPV vaccine to 14,000 tribal girls of 10 to 14 years of age. The report suggests that many children fell ill and 4 girls died after being injected with Gardasil. Their families, however, did not know that the children were being administered with it. It is believed that most of the girls' parents had no knowledge of this trial as the girls lived in government-run hostels. This is not the first time the BMGF or Bill Gates has been at the receiving end of public anger in India. This latest outburst is part of a constantly growing anger against Gates and his foundation in India. As early as April 2021, Gates received flack for expressing his reluctance about sharing COVID-19 vaccine technology with the developing countries like India. Honestly, they should be happy that they didn't give them those. After severe public criticism in India and abroad, BMGF Chief Executive Officer Mark Sussman officially supported a temporary waiver on vaccine IP. Yeah, it almost makes you think they purposefully didn't share it to get them clamoring for it, so then they said, please give us the vaccine. And they're like, okay, we'll give you the vaccine. Here you go. Gates has also been criticized by Indian farmer groups who have been protesting on the border of the national capital, New Delhi, for 6 months. The farmers are protesting against controversial laws promoting privatization of agriculture passed by the Hindu nationalist government, and they see Gates as a supporter of such efforts. Dainik Jagran, one of the largest Hindu newspapers in the country, reported on June 8th that farmers burned an effigy of Bill Gates at one of the protest sites due to his support for the privatization of agriculture in India. Bill and Gates and the BMGF's close relationship with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is no secret. In September 2019, the BMGF conferred the Global Goalkeeper Award to Modi for the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan (SBM) or Clean India mission to flagship programs that built 110 million toilets in 5 years. The move by the BMGF was also criticized by several human rights groups in India and abroad, which pointed to Modi's crackdown on civil liberties and dissent in India. Despite severe criticisms and protests, the BMGF went ahead with the conferring Modi and the award. All right, then we go to 2024. Bill Gates calls India a kind of laboratory to try things. Faces backlash. Months after the trials began, several participants reported severe side effects, again, just like in 2021. Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates has landed in hot water after referring to India as a kind of laboratory to try things. During a podcast with LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman, his remarks, while intended to highlight India's progress and its collaboration with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, have revived a controversial 2009 clinical trial funded by Bill Gates. So it goes way, way back. I was trying to go further back with the other one, but 2009, which killed 7 tribal schoolgirls. So he's done this many, many times. Mr. Gates said in a recent podcast, India is an example of country where there's plenty of things that are difficult there. The health, nutrition, education is improving, and they are stable enough and generating their government revenue enough that it's very likely that 20 years from now, people will be dramatically better off. It's kind of a laboratory to try things that when you prove them out in India, you can take them other places. Yeah, just try not killing all the children. In 2009, PATH again collaborated with the Indian Council of Medical Research to conduct clinical trials of cervical cancer vaccine on 14,000 tribal schoolgirls. Months after the trials began, several participants reported severe side effects and 7 deaths were recorded, although the deaths were later attributed to unrelated causes. An investigation into the trials uncovered serious ethical lapses, revealed the Skin Doctor. The trials were presented as a public health initiative concealing their experimental nature. Consent forms were allegedly signed by hostile wardens instead of the girls' parents, leaving families unaware of potential risks. He committed trials on people, experiments, and they didn't know it was an experiment. And you hear what he said here. It's kind of a laboratory to try things. When you prove them in India, you can take them other places. And then what happened during COVID? He took those trials other places because that's really what it's about, expanding their trials. Then we can move to Kenya. Kenya sued in Africa. Kenya sued at East African Court over Bill Gates Foundation immunities. They argue that the government has failed to ensure transparency, public participation, and accountability in granting immunities. Kenya is facing legal action at the East African Court of Justice in Tanzania over immunities granted to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The case filed on November 28, 2024, has been brought by Kenya petitioners Sigi Waguma Mwazia, Guchihohi Wario, who accuse Kenya of violating the EAC Treaty and the Kenyan Constitution. They argue that the government has failed to ensure transparency, public participation, and accountability. The petitioners are demanding that the Kenyan government provide details on how the Gates Foundation qualified for the immunities under the Privileges and Immunities Act, as well as copies of the signed documents, just like the vaccine companies had immunities and couldn't be sued. People are pissed. So, critiques of the Gates Foundation. I'm going to link to this. You can go over it yourself, but it involves agricultural programs using GMOs. Which the foundation says its goal is to boost the yields and incomes of millions of small farmers in Africa so they can lift themselves and their families out of hunger and poverty. The strategy is modeled on the Indian Green Revolution that boosted production of staple crops, but also left a legacy of structural inequity and escalating debt for farmers that contributed to massive mobilizations of peasant farms in India. This is also concerning because Gates is buying up tons of farmland in America and selling a lot of GMO products. A lot of links on here, what he's doing with food. It's also agricultural work in Africa. How does Gates influence media and food narratives? News about Bill Gates these days is often filtered through the perspective of the many academics, nonprofits, and think tanks that Gates funds. Sometimes it is delivered to readers by newsrooms with financial ties to the foundation, like NBC, reported Tim Schwab in Columbia Journalism Review. He documents more than $250 million in Gates grants to a variety of top news outlets. The Gates Foundation also funds many groups that work to shape public views on agriculture. One example is the Cornell Alliance for Science, a communication campaign based in Cornell University, launched with a Gates Foundation grant in 2014 to depolarize the charged debate around GMOs. The group trains global fellows, particularly in Africa, to promote GMOs in their home countries. Cornell Alliance for Science affiliates were also active in opposing pesticide regulations in Hawaii. Gates Foundation has donated $22 million to the group, so he gets around. Suffice to say, if Bill Gates says he's getting involved in women's health, if you're a woman, get the hell away. You don't want anything this guy has to do. He's using propaganda and illegal experiments to push his products on people. So I'm going to cut now to just a super clip of a bunch of clips of Bill Gates saying creepy stuff, which I'll also upload as a separate video later. But enjoy, and this has been your logical news of the day.
India is an example of a country where, there's plenty of things that are difficult there. And it's kind of a laboratory to try things that then, once you prove them out in India, you can take to other places. And so this equation has 4 factors, a little bit of multiplication. So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to 0. And that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to 0. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to 0. That's back from high school algebra, but let's take a look. First, we've got population. If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war. Not missiles, but microbes. Now, part of the reason for this is that we have invested a huge amount in nuclear deterrence, but we've actually invested very little in a system to stop an epidemic.
At least 80% of participants experienced a systemic side effect, ranging from severe chills to fevers. So are these vaccines safe?
Well, the FDA, not being pressured, will look hard at that. You know, the side effects were not super severe. That is, it didn't cause permanent health problems for the things there. Moderna did have to go with a fairly high dose. There's a lot of characteristics of these vaccines. It's great that we have multiple of them that are
Bill,
going out there. And yes, I think
you know the data
US
better than I do.
government.
But Bill, the data showed that everybody with a high dose had a side effect.
Yeah, but some of that is not dramatic, where it's just super painful. But yes, we need to make sure there's not severe side effects. The FDA, I think, will do a good job of that, despite the pressure.
The last thing you want is a bidding war between countries for this vaccine. We know there are 60 million healthcare workers around the world who are keeping everybody safe. They deserve to get this vaccine first. And from there, you want to do tiering in various countries to make sure your most vulnerable populations get it. In our country, that would be Blacks and Native Americans, people with underlying health conditions, and the elderly.
Well, masks, I'm a little puzzled by why that's become political, or why there's not higher compliance. It's not expensive, it's not hard, and so that's surprising. The difficulties of access to our testing system, I've been pretty loud about that throughout, and yet, people say, oh no, there's no problem, or very few people, but influential people. And what you're seeing is that there's long lines, it takes too long to get your result. And if you're particularly in low-income communities where the spread has been much higher, and there's a more prevalence of disease in Black Americans, so it's this great injustice coming at the same time that our awareness of a broad set of injustices is more acute. It's really awful, and yet we haven't solved that problem. So the U.S., on a relative basis, has done worse than other rich countries, which is ironic, because in every other disease, we're advising the world, we're funding the tools, we're going to the various forums, including WHO, and tackling it. This is the first time the U.S. Has not been leading a global response, and even our domestic work has been substandard.
We're seeing record high cases, deaths, and hospitalizations in the U.S. right now, and those numbers are climbing. How bad do you expect things to get over the next 3 or 4 months before the vaccine is widely available?
Well, sadly, the next 4 to 6 months could be the worst of the epidemic. The IHME forecast shows over 200,000 additional deaths. If we would follow the rules in terms of wearing masks and not mixing, we could avoid a large percentage of those deaths. So in the near term, it's bad news.
You've been sounding the alarm on the threat posed by infectious diseases and pandemics.
No, I thought the United States would do a better job handling it. Overall, when I did the forecast in 2015, I talked about the deaths potentially being higher. So this virus could be more fatal than it is. We didn't get the worst case. But the thing that's surprised me is that the economic impact in the US and around the world has been much greater than the forecast that I made 5 years ago.
A new Pew Research poll out last week showed that only 60% of the American people say they intend to get vaccinated. That includes less than half of Black Americans. How worried are you about the reluctance of Americans to take a vaccine, particularly among minority communities?
I think we have a real communications challenge, that you've got to find out who do people trust, make sure they've got the data. I hope as people see it being this vaccine rolled out, and reducing the death rate, reducing transmission to people you care about, that 60% number will go up. For some jobs, like working in a nursing home, the government could decide that it's important for those people to be vaccinated because that'll save a lot of lives. And so the track record will be developed, and I think we'll get over the 70% that should reduce the transmission dramatically.
President-elect Biden joined with former Presidents Obama and Bush and Clinton, suggesting that they would all take the vaccine publicly. Are you considering doing the same?
No, I'll do the same. When it's my turn, I'm not going to budge. But when my turn comes up, I will visibly take the vaccine because I think that it's a benefit to all people to not be transmitting.
Are you at all concerned about the wealthy and well-connected being able to get access?
Income service workers.
There are a lot of governors who oppose bringing back these lockdown orders and forcing businesses to close. What do you think? Do you think more states need to consider taking that kind of drastic action and the kind of drastic action we saw when the pandemic first began, or can there be a more nuanced approach?
Well, certainly mask wearing has essentially no downside. They're not expensive. Bars and restaurants in most of the country will be closed as we go into this wave. And I think, sadly, that's appropriate. Depending on how severe it is, the decision about schools is much more complicated because the benefits are pretty high. The amount of transmission is not the same as in restaurants and bars. So, trade-offs will have to be made. But the next 4 to 6 months really call on us to do our best, because we can see that this will end, and you don't want somebody you love to be the last to die of coronavirus.
When do you think life will fully return to what we thought of as normal back in January? No masks, no social distancing, no other protective measures necessary.
Certainly by the summer, we'll be way closer to normal than we are now. But even through early 2022, unless we help other countries get rid of this disease and we get high vaccination rates in our country, the risk of reintroduction will be there. And of course, the global economy will be slowed down, which hurts America economically in a pretty dramatic way. So we'll have, starting in the summer, about 9 months where a few things like big public gatherings will still be restricted. But we can see now that somewhere between 12 to 18 months, we have a chance, if we manage it well, to get back to normal.
Bill, you launched CEPI because you believe the world is unprepared for the next pandemic. What is CEPI?
CEPI is a coalition for epidemic preparedness. And the idea is to take a new way of building vaccines that could let us develop in less than a year a novel vaccine. They're called DNA, RNA vaccines, and so we'll fund a few projects to build specific vaccines, but not only will we get that, we'll prove out that these platforms can work, we'll understand the regulatory issues, and it gives us a chance of being able to respond in time when the next epidemic hits.
What are the new tools that we have at our fingertips to stop the next pandemic?
Well, right now, we're in the same situation we were in before, where it takes years to build a new vaccine. But the scientific idea of these new platforms could radically change that, so that a lot of the steps are sitting there ready. The factory piece, understanding the regulatory piece, and you just have to plug in some information, do some quick safety profiles, and then you can get into manufacturing quite rapidly.
And if we speed up this process, how many people are we actually saving?
Well, we don't always know the risk of an epidemic, and some epidemics, like a flu epidemic, could be absolutely gigantic. So it's hard to put a number to it, but we went back and looked, for example, at Ebola and said that if we'd had a vaccine within 30 weeks, it would have helped quite a bit. If we'd had it within 6 weeks, it would have been dramatically different.
How do epidemics impact our society financially, socially?
Well, the impact of a huge epidemic, like a flu epidemic, would be phenomenal because all the supply chains would break down. There'd be a lot of panic. Many of our systems would be overloaded. And so, we all hope that doesn't come along. But being ready for epidemics of different sizes, there's a lot more we should do. And CEPI is a step in that direction.
We've come a long way from the work that you and Melinda have done over the years on malaria.
Yes, so all these infectious diseases, deaths have come down, new tools are coming out, and governments have been very generous at supporting this work in partnership with us and others. So it's really an incredibly good news story that health is getting better all over the world. The presence of social media plus a pandemic is a combination that's never been tried before. And nobody would have predicted that I and Dr. Fauci would be so prominent in, really kind of evil theories about, did we create the pandemic? Are we trying to profit from it? And on and on. And so, I'm very surprised by that. I hope it goes away. The percentage that's really misled by these conspiracy theories, it's unclear to me. There's millions of messages out there, where my name or Dr. Fauci's name is used, but do people really believe that stuff? We're going to have to get educated about this over the next year and understand, how does it change people's behavior? How should we have minimized this, either, working with the social media companies or explaining what we were up to in a better way? From the foundation's point of view, the fact that he took that rescission of the global vaccine money, which is super, super important. The fact he rejoined the WHO, the fact that he's appointed smart people, the fact that Dr. Fauci will not be suppressed. They'll take full advantage of Francis Collins and Dr. Fauci, who are wonderful people. In terms of the epidemic, it sometimes felt like they were the only sane people in the U.S. government.
Is there a lesson for you, for anyone else looking at this?
Well, he's dead, so in general, you always have to be careful. What happens with beef? My climate group, Breakthrough Energy, just announced literally today an investment in an Australian group called Ruminate that helps cows not be so much a source of methane emissions. So we have two paths to solving that. That's 6% of global emissions are cows who burp and fart methane to an extreme degree. You can either fix the cows to stop them doing that, or you can make beef without the cow. And both of those, will be pursued to see which one can lead to the best product in terms of taste, health, and cost. Now, malaria is, of course, transmitted by mosquitoes. I brought some here so you could experience this. We'll let those roam around the auditorium a little bit. There. There's no reason only poor people should have the experience. Those mosquitoes are not infected.
Guy who made billions out of creating super clunky corporate software. What you didn't realize is that Bill Gates doesn't think of himself that way. Bill Gates doesn't think of himself as some guy who got super rich making bad software. Bill Gates thinks of himself as God, in control of the solar system. And that's why Bill Gates is now backing something called sun-dimming technology that would reflect sunlight out of the Earth's atmosphere, causing global cooling. Ooh, that's not fraught with risks. You thought gain-of-function research on pathogens was dangerous. Try that. But that doesn't stop Harvard University. Its scientists are testing that technology by spewing calcium carbonate dust into the atmosphere.
Bill Gates is backing the first high-altitude experiment of one radical climate change solution. creating a massive chemical cloud that could cool the Earth. It's called solar geoengineering, and it's highly controversial. It would look something like this. Thousands of planes would fly very high and use nozzles to inject millions of tons of light-reflecting particles into the stratosphere. It would create a thin chemical cloud of those particles around the whole planet, blocking some sunlight from reaching the surface. It would mimic a giant volcanic eruption, which we know cools the Earth.